The Pulse of Providence with Steph Machado on WPRI.com.
Hello and thanks for watching Pulse of Providence. I'm Steph Machado. For the past decade, the I-195 Redevelopment District Commission has been overseeing what happens to 26 acres of land in Providence freed up when the state moved Interstate 195. The most recent chairman of the commission, Bob Davis, stepped down last month, and Governor Dan McKee has now appointed Marc Crisafulli as the new chair. And joining me in studio to discuss his vision for the 195 land is Mr. Crisafulli. Thanks so much for coming in.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So our viewers might recognize you from previous interviews about Twin River in your former job at Bally's. So just tell us, what are you doing now and why did you want to lead the 195 Commission?
So I'm retired now. I do a number of things part-time, but due to health reasons, I decided to step down. I had a big battle with cancer, and I'm honored that Governor McKee asked me to do this. I'm delighted to do it. It's an opportunity to make a real impact in the community and to give back to Rhode Island. Rhode Island's done so much for me over my lifetime. So
it's been about a decade that the 195 Commission has been working to develop this land, selling off various parcels. There's been 5 buildings actually constructed so far. I'll just list them off: the Wexford building, the Aloft Hotel, the Trader Joe's / apartment building, the Emblem 125 apartment building, and the Chestnut Commons apartment building. There's some other projects in the pipeline: the Fane Tower, the State Health Lab, a bank headquarters, and we'll get to all of those in a moment. But tell me, what is your vision for the unused 195 land?
So I think it's a great opportunity now to try and take a fresh look at what we're doing and how we go forward. I'd like to try and emphasize commercial development more. Residential is important. It's an important part of what's already been done there, and given the housing crisis in the state, it will continue to be an important part, but I really want to emphasize commercial development with a particular focus on life sciences. That's something that, you know, Governor McKee has talked about as a priority in his State of the State. I know Speaker Shekarchi is really focused on life sciences as well, and we have to do our part to try and help that. In addition to focusing on commercial development, I really want to try and maximize the value of the land. When you look at the past transactions, understandably, we really haven't received a lot of money for the land that we've sold, and now the time has come to try and really maximize the value we can get.
And so, yeah, my very next question was, you know, there was this promise of these life sciences jobs back when the land and back when the commission was first created. I spoke to the Senate President Dominic Ruggiero a couple years ago, who expressed disappointment that a lot of the projects thus far have been apartment buildings, or they've been sort of mixed use with some retail but mostly residential. So it sounds like you're looking to get back to this life sciences goal. How can you achieve that?
Yeah, so we're off to a great start right now with the new state lab building. So the State Health Lab is going to be there. We expect construction to start in March, and we're hoping that's a catalyst for significantly more commercial development in the life sciences area down in that area. In addition, we also have Bank Rhode Island is coming in now. That building's going to start construction. It's in process right now. But that will be exciting to have another commercial corporate tenant in that area. You know, we're trying to create a community within a community, but remember, our mission is focused on economic development and job creation.
And when we talk about job creation, so the State Health Lab, the jobs at that lab will sort of just be shifting from a different location in Providence. We know Brown will also be in that building. And then there's going to be some sort of spec space for private lab tenants. Do you think it'll be difficult to get those tenants? Are there people lined up to, you know, do life sciences activity in that building once it's constructed?
Well, that's the challenge, right? It's no good to just build a building. You have to create an environment that allows for economic development, for these companies to come in, to hire properly, for the workers to be able to live and work there. And we're optimistic that a developer has put their money where their mouth is and believes that they can fill up the private lab space. And we hope that's the first of many. Brown is also looking at doing a separate building right adjacent to the district. And we want to, over time, we need to create a cluster so that more and more of these businesses want to come here. You know, there are models around the country of how it's been done successfully. We have some greater challenges to solving that here in Rhode Island, but we have to go after it.
I want to talk about the Fane Tower.
Sure.
For those who don't know, this is the 550-foot residential skyscraper planned to be built right across from the Wexford building on parcel 42. The closing date on the sale of the land is March 28th. Fane is in the middle of trying to get a new design approved. There's been sort of delay after delay. So let me just ask you straight up, do you think this tower is getting built?
Well, we're going to see. You know, Fane today has the right to build the tower. It's an approved project. They have everything that they need. They could close on the land and start construction. They've decided not to proceed in that manner for reasons which I understand, so they've submitted a revised design. So we're now in the design review process for that, working very closely with all of the neighborhood associations and all of the stakeholders involved, and we'll see what happens. We'll know by this spring what's going to happen with this project.
Do you think there's any chance the sale really closes March 28th?
Unlikely.
And why is that?
Because they've decided to go forward with a new design, right? And there are certain conditions that have to be met in order for them to be able to close on the land, because as a commission, it's our responsibility to ensure that anyone who closes on the land actually delivers on their commitments and builds what they promised to build. So in order to close on the land, they have to have all of the financing done and a construction contract in place.
As far as you know, I know they definitely don't have a construction contract in place. Are you aware as to whether they have financing for this $300 million building?
We're not aware at this stage. As I said, we're going through the design review project now, and that will be part of the discussion before we finalize this process.
Are you willing to give them another delay on the closing date?
We have to follow the process and see where it takes us. What I can say is I am uncomfortable having this land continue to be tied up. So we need to make a decision one way or the other and go forward. If this project is going to be built, wonderful. If not, we need to find something else to build there. It's a signature parcel, and the time has come to move on this. I think it's very important to this area that we solve what's happening with that parcel.
Yeah, so not you, but the commission signed the purchase and sale agreement in 2018. So this has been tied up for a number of years. When would the commission put the land back on the market?
Well, we have to see what happens first with the project. We have an approved partner today, and we're working with that partner to see if the project can be built. And so we'll see. We'll see what happens. By this spring, we'll know whether it's going forward or not.
It sounds like you're not committing one way or another to extending the March 28th deadline, but doesn't sound like you're willing to extend it for years to come.
Yeah, and in fairness to the Fane project, there was litigation that tied it up and slowed it down for a while. I think absent that litigation, we would already have either had the tower under construction or we would have moved on.
I'm wondering if you think that whether things have changed as well about the appetite for this type of project. So the Superman building is not on the 195 land, but that project, it seems, is going to get constructed before the Fane Tower, and that's another skyscraper full of residential housing units. And then if the Fane Tower is built, that's another skyscraper full of residential housing units downtown. Do you think I've heard concern over the years about whether they'd even be able to fill such a huge residential tower. Do you have concerns about that, especially with the Superman project?
Well, listen, there's a major housing crisis in the state right now, right? So you look at various estimates, some say we're short 20,000 units, 30,000 units, so that's a lot. We're talking about hundreds of units per project here. But this was the same criticism that we heard almost 20 years ago when the other apartment buildings were built downtown next to the now IGT Center. And it took a while for them to fill up, but they find their level and they can fill up. We need the housing. So I'm not at all concerned about any kind of competition or overlap between the Superman building project and the Fane project.
Do you wish that the Fane project had affordable units? Because I know we have a housing shortage, but I don't know that the housing shortage is entirely a need for luxury market rate units.
It's not. So we are committed to trying to deliver affordable units where we can on I-195 land. We have a number of competing priorities that we have to make sure we attend to. But remember, even if a particular building doesn't have affordable units, its availability creates other availability for different projects. For example, my son lives in this land right now, right? He lives in one of the buildings, 580 South Water, and he absolutely loves it. Even though that's not an affordable unit, if that building wasn't built and he didn't live there, he would be taking a unit somewhere else. So there is a trickle-down effect to all of the housing within the market.
And that's the Trader Joe's apartment building.
It's next to that.
No, yeah, I just call it the Trader Joe's building. I've looked at the prices of some of the rents at some of the buildings that have been built on the land. The Emblem 125 building is advertising one-bedroom apartments for more than $2,000, up to $3,300 a month. So certainly not something a middle-class worker can afford. When developers come before you, as the chair of the commission, do you intend on asking them to include more affordable and workforce housing in their projects? Yeah,
it's important that we address it all. You know, we're trying to create a community within a community, right? So when you look at one of the projects now, not only does it have some affordable units and workforce housing, it also has a daycare center, right? These are the kind of things that we want to make sure we provide for. But in any individual project, there may or may not be affordable housing.
So it's not a priority of yours to make sure every residential project has affordable units?
We look at it on a project-by-project basis, but we want to make sure in totality we're doing what we can to try and increase affordable housing. Look, to solve the housing crisis in the state, it requires everyone to pitch in, and as the commission, we want to do our part.
I want to talk to you about parking, because
Sure.
this is something you talk about a lot at your meetings. It's talked about a lot in Providence. There's sort of two sides. There's folks who believe that we shouldn't be including tons of parking in new developments. They want to encourage walking and biking in the city, and not taking up a lot of space with parking lots and parking garages. Other folks say, look, people aren't going to live in the city if they can't bring their car, because we don't have a robust public transit system like in New York or Boston with the subway system. People need to drive to their jobs if they don't live downtown. So I guess, where do you stand on this because you will be, again, hearing a lot of proposals for properties that may or may not have parking?
So there are so many stakeholders involved. You've mentioned a lot of the considerations that they have. We try and take as much feedback as we possibly can and just make the best decision we possibly can under the circumstances. There is a need for some parking. There's just simply no question about it. We've done one parking study. We're going to do another one now. We're also doing traffic studies. All of these impacts, we try and manage them as best we can and take into account as many different considerations as we possibly can. When there are people that are criticizing some of these things, some of them agree with the mission, want to see the development, but want to see it done in a particular way and want to see it done as well as possible. Other people just oppose development. So we try and work very closely with those that agree with the mission but want to see it improved.
Yeah, and you mentioned people that just oppose development. How do you deal with sort of that not in my backyard attitude that we have seen from some folks on College Hill? They've said that development blocks their view of the water. I mean, how do you address that, or do you just sort of ignore it because your job is to develop the land?
Well, you can't just ignore it. You have to listen to everyone in the community. You want to hear their voices, you want to hear their perspectives, but ultimately, we have a mission here. We've been charged with focusing on the things that matter for so many Rhode Islanders. Economic development, job growth, housing. It's really important, right? And it's a challenge when some of those groups are just, the not in my backyard phenomenon. That's why we have a housing crisis. Because everyone says, yes, we need a more affordable housing, but no, we don't want it near us. And we have to try and manage those considerations as best as we can, but we have to move forward. We can't keep living our life in the rearview mirror.
I want to talk about the money.
Sure.
You mentioned it a little bit off the top. So in fall of 2021, I reported the sale of 195 land parcels by your commission had so far brought in $1.2 million. That is still the total land sales today, although there are some sales pending. The Chafee administration had estimated the land sales would have brought in $43 million by last year to pay back the debt for purchasing the land. That obviously didn't happen. We're at $1.2 million. So what's your philosophy on this commission? Are you going to try and get higher land sales so the state can pay back its debt, or is the priority getting buildings built even if you have to sell the land at a lower price?
Well, it's not as black and white as you might sound. I want to focus on increasing land values. We need to get higher prices. You had to start somewhere, and I understand what the commission did to get things rolling, but now we want to focus on higher prices. And when you look at some of the projects we're considering now, we're talking about land prices of $2 or $3 million, significantly above what we've received in the past. At the same time, however, there are certain other objectives that when you can meet them, you have to go forward even if you're not getting money. For example, the state health lab.
Right, you're selling that land for $1.
Yeah, and it's such a critically important project for everything we're trying to accomplish that it's worth it. We could sell that land for more money and put up another apartment building. That's the tension, is that the most value that we can get for the land is tied by building residential buildings, right? And so we have to, those are competing tensions, they're healthy, but we have to try and thread the needle of making sure in totality we get enough commercial development and we maximize the land values.
So do you think, knowing that balancing act, do you think that the sales of the land sales will ever pay back the debt, or will taxpayers end up footing at least part of that bill?
No, we have a long way to go to see how that plays out, but we are supremely focused on it now. We have 9 years to go in the life of the commission. We have a lot of land to address still, and we're focused on making sure we've protected the Rhode Island taxpayers and delivered as much value as we can.
What do you think about the speed with which the 195 land has been developed thus far?
So, look, it's always a challenge because you need willing partners to come in to want to invest millions of dollars to build a building, right? And that's a challenge. We are where we are. I want to focus now on being as aggressive as we can going forward, right? The time has come. Governor McKee has articulated a vision for 2030. That really only gives us 2 or 3 years of work to make sure we have as much built out as possible by 2030.
What is your vision for the western section of the 185 land? For folks, just to describe, on East Franklin Street, sort of near I-95. That really has not been developed yet at all.
Yeah, we have a number of parcels there, and that's something we are taking a fresh look at right now, because we haven't made any progress there yet, and it's something we want to address. It's going to be a challenging area to address, but at the same time, it's a great opportunity if we can get it right. So I don't have an answer for you yet on that, Steph. We need to take a real fresh look at that.
Do you think that section is more difficult to develop because of where it is on the highway?
I think that can be both a blessing and a curse. So we have to figure out what our strategy is for that.
Okay. And I just want to also ask you, have any news to make about any upcoming projects on the land? I know you've got the WPRI headquarters coming in. Are you talking to any other companies or commercial tenants that might be coming onto the land?
So we're constantly in discussions with people. We have a terrific executive director, Caroline Skolnick, and she's working on this. She and her team are working aggressively. I have nothing new to report, right? We have our processes that we need to follow, but the commission is energized and excited about the future.
And what can we expect? You meet monthly, so what can we expect at your February meeting? Do you think that you might be approving a design for the Fane Tower, or what can we expect?
Well, that remains to be seen. There's still work to be done. We got a lot of feedback, so we had the first hearing in their redesign approval process in January. We heard from over 50 different people from the community. It was really exciting to get so much feedback and input, and so now we need to digest that. There's a process to digesting that. If they're ready for a second hearing in February, we will proceed to another hearing. I don't yet know if we'll take a vote on it, if in fact they're ready. We haven't seen the information. They're doing the work now. We have a consultant that works with them. There are a number of questions they need to answer. You know, they've dramatically changed the amount of parking in the building. They've taken away the balconies. There are some wind considerations. So there are important elements of the design that we need to focus on. When that's been addressed, we can then bring it back to the community on the agenda, February or March, whenever they're ready, to consider it further. At some point after that, we will take a vote.
Marc Crisafulli, Chair of the 195 Commission, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for watching Pulse of Providence. I'm Steph Machado. We'll see you next time.